Our next segment is also meant to bring us together, but in a much more kind of old school kind of way. It's what we're calling a town hall. And this is an opportunity where we're going to bring the leadership of the Osher Center together up front, and we'd like to hear from you. And we're going to use Slido to do that, as well as traditional microphones. And what we're interested in is your feedback, your comments, your suggestions. What programs that we're trying to do, like this one, make sense to you and are meaningful? Are there some other ideas that we're not thinking about, or things we've done that really don't work for you? And what should we really elevate to bring to the fore of our community? Like I said, we'll be using Slido, and as we bring people to the microphone, if we can ask you to be really precise in your questions, to really generate a discussion, we would appreciate that so we can hear from more people. For this, I'd like to briefly introduce and invite up to the stage my Osher Center colleagues, friends, and co-leaders. So first is Dr. Donald Levy, our medical director at the Osher Clinical Center for Integrative Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital. He's also an instructor in medicine at HMS and one of the best physicians I've ever met. So Don, you want to come on up? Dr. Darshan Mehta, who's our educational director at the Osher Center, but he's also the medical director for the Benson and Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Mass General, and he too is also an instructor in medicine at the Harvard Medical School. And then we have Dr. Gloria, who graciously has stepped into this transitional role now, working with me as the Associate Interim Research Director for the Osher Center. And she's also the director of the Integrative Medicine T32 Fellowship based at Harvard Medical School, and also an associate professor at the Harvard Medical School. And finally, Ms. Aterah Nusrat, who's our Osher's program manager. And frankly, without Aterah's creative leadership and her organizational skills and her tireless effort, along with her staff, none of us would be here today. But before fielding questions from you, and in sort of as a way of enhancing our network's awareness as well as its appreciation of itself, I wanted to do a brief shout out to a few of the members of our distributed network. So this is a reminder, if you want to send questions up electronically, go to Slido. And so the first shout out is to Mass General Hospital, and I'd like to congratulate Vitaly Napadot and Bruce Rosen and other members of the MGH Martinez Center for receiving a very large and a distinguished Center of Excellence grant from NCCIH. This is a really highly innovative project combining mindfulness training and vagal stimulation that's coordinated with respiration rate to change autonomic physiology. And they're looking at the impacts of this really innovative combination of therapies on neural, a lot of brain scanning, inflammatory, and clinical outcomes in migraine patients. And those of you interested in this, Vitaly will also be presenting some of the background to this work at our grand rounds in February. I also want to do a I also want to give a shout out to one of my colleagues and mentors, Dr. Lou Lipsitz, who's at Hebrew Senior Life, and he's the director of the Institute for Aging Research. This week, actually maybe even tonight, he's going to be awarded the 2018 Donald Kent Award, which is a very prestigious award in aging to acknowledge a remarkable lifetime achievement in the area of gerontology. So. And another shout out to Zev Schulman-Olivier and his team at Cambridge Health Alliance's Center for Mindfulness and Compassion for organizing earlier this fall a really innovative and successful conference exploring the interface between technology and mindfulness. It was a very well-attended and rich discussion. And this is really cool to me. I hope you think the same. I want to acknowledge the leaderships at the Harvard Medical School of two deans, Dean Hundert and Saldana, to make it mandatory as of this fall for every single entering Harvard Medical School student to participate in a 6-session program in resiliency and mind-body skills. Not an elective, mandatory. Darshan Mehta, who's on the stage, OSHA's educational director, was a real key force in making this happen. And he, along with Drs. Michelle Dossett, who I know is in the office, Dr. Denninger, and others, delivered the program. And this is a program that was based on a program that I think Elise Park had a lot to do with and was developed at the Benson Henry Institute. And who would have thunk that a few years ago that this would be a required course for Harvard Medical School students? So I hope that not only we benefit, but that others that follow our lead use this as a model. So to the deans. And then finally, a shout out to Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and especially to Dr. Gloria for getting a perfect score on the renewal of their T32 Integrative Medicine Research Training Fellowship grant, which is no small feat. And Gloria and her HMS faculty are really proud to continue what actually represents the very first and the longest running NIH training fellowship in integrative medicine. So I'm going to stop there, and I know there are many other successes, but I really wanted to make time for you guys to share your thoughts and to create a discussion here. But if you do have other ideas that you want to share with the community, any success stories or landmark events, please let us know. Jessica Kaufman, who we'll introduce later, our administrative guru, will collect these things, and we can disseminate them on our monthly blogs and put them on our network maps, and so that the network has a better understanding of who we are as a whole. Okay, so now the floor is yours, and maybe just to move away from the technology, we can start with an audience question. So again, the idea here is we'd love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, any things to bring to the community. And if you don't have anything from the audience, I'll see if I can find some things from the Slido field. And if we don't have anything there, maybe I can start with our panel. Okay, so here we go.
Nice. Oh, wow.
So I'm going to go, some of these have been upvoted. I guess the first question that strikes my eye is, why do you think there's resistance to accepting the validity of integrative medicine interventions and a greater push for pharmacological approaches? And how do we help facilitate this paradigm shift? So I'll bring that to the panel to start with. Maybe Don, since you've been at this for longer, I'll just put you on the spot.
Why is there resistance? Western thought, Western medicine, tradition. I was discussing with some fellows the other day that there's now evidence that looking for the silver bullet in an herbal product might not be the right way to go, that there's a thing called the entourage effect, which is being spoken about a lot for medical marijuana, where there are 60 or 70 active ingredients, and maybe our approach to looking for the one that's the right one and call it the silver bullet and make it a pharmaceutical is not always the best way to treat human suffering and disease. So there's that whole philosophy and a shift that way that causes resistance when we're doing things that are, quote, messy, but maybe it is messy to take care of other people. So that's part of the answer there. I think it's gaining more and more acceptance as people also tend to accept a scientific look at what they're doing, at least a systematic look, because in the past people just said, some famous person wrote a book and said that's the way it's done, so we'll all do it that way. And there's less and less in that, and more people that are really smart looking at what we do and coming up with reasons why it might work and why we might pursue it. So there's a lot of good things going on now that I think are making integrative medicine a part of healthcare the way it should be.
Yeah, Darshan?
Yeah, I would just say that one of the ways that we can continue to elevate our dialogue is to have elevated conversations, which requires all of us here, as well as the outside community, to be critical and be actively critical of the work that we do so that it really improves the quality of the work. So one forum that we've really tried to do that has been our grand rounds. And again, this is open to our community. It is, we welcome all of you there. We would want to make it the best attended grand rounds held at Brigham Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. So if we can have that as a goal between now and the next network forum, it would be quite an amazing feat.
That's great. This next question sort of folds into that, and I know that Darshan and Gloria, you do medical consultations, and Don as well, running our clinic. But many other physicians are not as fluent in referrals or knowledgeable about what resources are available or the evidence for or against them. And so the top question on this list is, how do we tell our physicians or get our physicians to refer their patients to integrative medicine therapies? So maybe Gloria, you can start and then we'll pass it on.
I mean, I think that surprisingly, so I practice at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Healthcare Associates, which is the primary care clinic there, and there's actually, you know, a lot of openness to integrative therapies. I think much of the barriers lie in just education, you know, of the physicians in terms of the actual evidence that is out there that can back up some of the therapies that we provide. And then just really knowing the network and who to refer to and how. And so, you know, a lot of the work is around communication, interprofessional communication, and education of, you know, of our colleagues.
I would just say we're pretty lucky in the city to have pretty much every major medical center have a representation of some dimension of integrative therapies. So really, the biggest barrier is oftentimes just lack of knowledge. I think in general, there's been quite a dramatic shift in the past decade where people are definitely open to referring. I mean, most providers are open to referring to one of these centers. But I think Don and I were just commensurating the other day that there's still, even though we've been at our respective centers for a decade or so, people still don't know we exist.
Yeah,
sure,
please.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I think this is also where our network maps actually come in handy, because you saw the clinical network map, and Dave King, I believe, was saying that we need participation to populate that. So anybody who is a clinician affiliated with an academic institution, we can engage with you and get you on the map, and I think it's part of our job to publicize that. So the more we interface with different clinics, both complementary and integrative and also conventional, I think that will help cross that bridge, basically. So I think that's useful to hear as well for me.
Yeah, and I would say that it's obvious to this group, but Don and I, we were part of a study at the Osher Center, and one of the visions of the founder of this Osher Center and who helped start the clinic, David Eisenberg, you know, we all stand on his shoulders for the field of integrative medicine, said, what happens when you put these centers not out in the community, but embed them in a tertiary care hospital? Does that change their visibility? Does it change their credibility? Does it change the flow? And so in a study that we did at our clinic, we had over 1,500 consecutive patients describe how they got there, and about half of the patients, and you can correct me, Don, are coming from referrals within the hospital. So there's something to be said about that. But going back to Darshan's comment, we also are interested in asking what kind of communication do you have with your physician about integrative medicine? And many people still do not talk to their physician about their use of alternative therapies that may synergize with or potentially confound some of the treatments that are being recommended. And the number one reason that they report for not disclosing it is because the doctor never asked. And so I think there's some room in terms of education about making that part of the general discussion between the patient and the practitioner. Anyone from the audience want to be brave enough to step up and bring a human question? Yeah, please use the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I am a holistic practitioner, and my question is that can we also have a representation from the holistic CAM practitioner community sometimes in the form of a panel to help exchange information, education about the CAM practices from their mouth, from somebody who's trained in it, so that it can get to be more and more truly integrative? Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a question about how do we expand out into the community to other therapies that are not integrated within the hospital themselves. Do you want to say something about that, Aterah? And then I have some comments as well.
Well, I think that's going to be a work in progress. At the moment, we are focused on the Harvard network. We felt we had to have some boundaries to actually create a product which we could use. I think at the moment we have a lot of people aggregated under the other category, which we know is, we would like to expand that at some point.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. I think we're going to have to work with you to figure out what's the next step from expanding beyond the Harvard network itself.
Yeah. But I will say a couple things and then pass it on to Darshan. One is that we've tried to make this a center without walls as well as without doors. This conference is at no cost, and it's accessible to anyone within or without the community. I think that's trying to create a place where people can get together. We also do the same with our grand rounds, and the grand rounds specifically is designed to bring people from the community together with people inside the network. And afterwards, we provide coffee and snacks for people to get to network and know each other and talk about those sorts of things. So there's more room to grow and expand our inclusiveness and touch on topics that are not as close to biomedicine as many of the practitioners are here, but those are some of our initial starts. And Darshan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, if you are, for example, if you are sharing the care of a patient with an academic clinician that is, especially if it's based in the Harvard system and you think you have a good case to present, I would encourage you to contact Aterah or one of us, because it can be one of those cases that we would sort of evaluate potentially to present at one of our grand rounds presentations. Again, to build critical dialogue, to build understanding across systems, and then to understand how do we advance the work from here. So.
Yeah, and one of our most provocative and interesting discussions, led by Patty, who's here, was on a case study of a patient within the hospital receiving Reiki therapy, and I think it created a really fascinating interdisciplinary discussion of things that are already happening, but not quite on the radar of everyone involved in the community. So I'm going to do one of these and then come back just to no, you can, a little standing exercise. But sort of connecting a little bit to the earlier part of this discussion, how do we deal with interpatient differences in the responses to alternative therapies? Almost this personalized or patient-centered approach. I think Catherine and Manoj really spoke to some of these genetic, potentially different responses. And there's even some interesting literature out there now saying that some people have very negative reactions to meditation, that there's no free lunch for everybody, and maybe there's some personalized difference between people that shouldn't be asked to sit still for a while. So I'm curious if maybe Gloria, since you do quite a bit on mind-body medicine, or Dawn, since you advise on a lot of lifestyle and supplementary things. Maybe we'll start with Dawn and then go to Gloria.
No, I'd yield.
Okay.
Yield.
To the senator from the right. No pun intended.
I was a primary care doc for 25 years, and when you sit with another human being across from you who is ill or wanting health care or prevention, there's a lot to take in to get to understand that person, and then you look at all the resources you have, and it could be randomized controlled trials, or what my teachers taught me, or what expert panels say, or what they can afford, and you kind of work out a plan. And I think as new tools come, it would be easier, because I'd love to know that why I shouldn't even start SAMI, we were talking about, on this person, because I already know something about their genome. They won't do well with it. The way it works now, and the way it's always worked for me, is we embark on a journey together, and I say, for your depression, it hasn't worked for you to take the various drugs that are out there. How about we try SAMI, and we'll do it for 6 weeks, and here's the dose, and here's how we'll keep track of it. And if you throw up for 3 days, it's probably not going to be a go. If you feel great in 2 weeks, we'll just continue to watch it. And if after 8 weeks nothing's happened, we just did a little trial. And I think that's going to be the way medicine goes. And the more information, I'd love to have a genomic printout when somebody walks in the door and can already narrow down the kinds of things. Or a lot of that also is gotten by sitting and talking to someone. I can learn in a few minutes, and I've learned from teachers of mine like Randy Paulson, who's out here. Meditation's not for everybody. I don't need any genome printout to know that. In fact, you look at a person's face and they go, "Are you kidding? If I sit still, I get more anxious." How about Tai Chi for you? Would you like to move and pay attention to your breathing? Well, that sounds better. And you work it through together to figure things out.
And I'd just like to annotate that because I've watched Don in action, and some of this is clinical experience, but a lot of it is based on staying so up to date with all the literature. So if someone comes in with a balance problem and he might recommend Tai Chi, he doesn't just say, what do you think about this? He might pull out 2 or 3 papers and say, you know, there's someone just like you, and there's some studies around this, and that sort of enhances the discussion and the uptake. So there's an intuitive clinical sense that's married with evidence.
I actually show them your book.
I do. I pay him for that. But I know he's given me articles on supplements I've asked him about and things like that. So maybe, Gloria, do you want to add something to that?
I mean, I guess just to say that I really think that integrative medicine and mind-body medicine, it's no different from pharmaceuticals in terms of the discussion that we had. Like the one size does not fit all. Like I don't know why is it that we ever thought that in our history in clinical trials that we there are always folks that do well and some folks that don't and some in the middle, and it's not a mistake that happens. And I think we're really this is the era of personalized medicine and precision medicine that's going to apply to all of us and all of these therapies. And I think we're just trying to figure this out now. It's and for the mind-body research that I do, we see the same thing. We see the same thing in our trials, that some folks are very drawn to the therapies and get a good response, and others that don't, just as Don was saying. And I think some of my interest going forward is to figure out how do we better target our therapies, emphasize certain things versus others within just the mind-body therapies to personalize this more and make it more individualized, and find out how we can best help each individual person.
Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of what's so provocative about the discussion earlier about personalized medicine and genomics and epigenetic phenomena and behaviors, is that clinical trials are designed today to look at one specific outcome for the average person in that population. And there's value to that. If we really at a phase 3 trial where you have something and you want to know if it's generalizable across a lot of people, that's great. But there are a lot of questions that really don't fit into that paradigm. So I think the use of big data, the use of individual-based markers is really going to be this huge disruptive paradigm shift that I think will apply not just to medicine, to integrative medicine, but to medicine as a whole. So thank you for your patience. Yeah.
Pleasure. So I work in public policy, and I'm curious about how important it is for a profession to have professional licensure to be respected by the medical community.
You ready, Darshan? You look like you got something.
So question, just to repeat, so the question is how important is it to have licensure?
Professional licensure for a particular profession, for a physician to feel comfortable referring somebody to that profession to seek services.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of us, as physicians here on the panel, it's sort of paramount to the work that we do to have professional licensure. I think my own personal sense is that fields continue to evolve, and standards of practice and scope of practice issues are still evolving in many disciplines, and especially in integrative therapies. Some are established, and I think are well established, and so those are actually quite easy to say that you should be seeing somebody who is a licensed professional in that specific domain, like acupuncture, massage therapy, chiropractic care. These are all for a long time, have been established practice guidelines. But other fields don't have that, and I think there are certainly experts here in our audience who are at the forefront of developing those professional guidelines. So in yoga therapy, in Massachusetts specifically, naturopathic medicine, and others as well that don't have yet clear guidelines. And so it is important, I would say.
Well, let me just maybe expand on that, because I work with professions all across the country, and there are conversations both in this state and other states. So in Minnesota, for example, they have a safe harbor bill that they did many years ago, where we know they have the Mayo Clinic. And there is question about, because it gets very, when you talk about scope of practice, that's a whole conversation in and of itself, which gets very complex. And also the ability to be able to support a professional licensing board. So there's a lot of implications just beyond the profession's desire to, or lack of desire to. So, thinking about the future of how integrative medicine going forward, and be able to do fair licensing laws, professional licensing laws, or safe harbor bills to be able to allow people to practice appropriately. So I think we're in a bit of a interesting shift.
Yeah.
And also working with the ACIH, they created the physician desk reference for integrative medicine, and I don't know how much that's used. So I don't know what goes in a physician's mind to decide whether a profession is a viable profession. Is it the research? Is it the professional licensure? Is it because it's in the physician's desk reference? Like, where does that evidence come from that somebody feels comfortable? Because I know my physician, if I talk to them about integrative medicine or what I do, I get blank stares and being like, well, why wouldn't you consider pharmaceuticals or this or that? I'm like, well, because I actually want to pursue something else before we go there. And so I get a lot of blank stares.
Yeah. Well, I think this question of credentialing is really key. For example, the acupuncture community has gone a long way, and now there's national accreditation and state accreditation, similarly chiropractics and things like that. Yoga is not as centralized, and things like Tai Chi are unwieldy. And I think there's a lot of debate within those communities. Who's to decide whether you're good enough or not good enough, and how do you decide that in such a pluralistic system? So I think those are rich debates, and thank you for bringing that question up.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was just going to add that I think anybody practicing, licensed, unlicensed, whatever you do, if you write a letter to a physician saying, I saw your patient today and I did the following, I'm impressed. I remember the first time I was ignorant, didn't know much about chiropractic, and a chiropractor wrote me a note saying, I looked at the MRI and I agree with the L5-S1, blah, 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 and I did the following, and I set up a course of 8 visits, and if that doesn't work, I would recommend that you send him to an orthopedic surgeon, and I was blown away. That's just exactly what I'm looking for. Someone's willing to tell me what they do, what they think. They have some of the data that we all share, like an x-ray, and they're being very professional about it, and admitting possibly after 8 visits, I won't get them better, and we'll do something else together. So you can always write, whatever you do. I don't care if you have a license or not. We all there's many licensed people I wouldn't send anybody to. I've met plenty over the years,
Yeah.
at least not after the first one that I.
I think
But-
it's, yeah. Okay. No, sorry.
Just that even when I was just doing primary care, there's a cardiologist that would always send me a note explaining his thinking or her thinking, and I was impressed. And there was other cardiologists I never heard from. So they're all licensed. They're all got, the right credential, but some are much more easy to work with, I think, and I think better clinicians. So.
And I think a lot of these changes happen on a person-to-person relationship, and so how we all carry ourselves in the community really makes a big difference as to how these change happens. While there's big things happening at the top, a lot of things happen at that grassroots person-to-person connection. So there's one very easy, low-hanging one for Aterah here, which is, can we make, do we have video meeting capability for integrative medicine grand rounds? Some people are across town, and it's hard for them to attend and participate regularly. Video would be really helpful.
Yeah. Yes. We've actually had videos up since 2015, so we have a whole archive of videos. And as Peter said earlier, it's one thing to have the video, I think, but it's another thing to actually come in person. So if you can come, coming to the coffee hour and actually meeting each other, I think a lot of the people that have been doing that for a period of time find the value in that, because there's continuity in the community then. There's one other thing I just wanted to say. So how many people would be interested in having it live streamed? Because we have contemplated that idea.
And how many people who said that would do that instead of coming in person? So we don't want to lose you. Okay.
So we will look into that. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Let's finish up with one last question from Dr. Liu.
You just mentioned about the person-to-person connections. So I have a suggestion that OSHA maybe can help to organize some special events or grand round, not just only at the Brigham Women Hospital, but all the other regional hospitals. And another suggestion is that maybe, for example, can connecting acupuncturists with pain specialists, conventional pain specialists together in the same room and have an event, or like a yoga practitioners and with mental health, the conventional physicians at the same room, so that can form some personal connections. That is my 2 cents.
Great idea. Great idea. So I think we're going to wrap up this section now, and thank you all for the rich discussion.